Randy Forbs, Congressman, great to have you with us today.
John, it's always good to be with you. Hope you're doing well.
Doing fine, and I said I had a column the other day. I am moving to Northern Virginia, but we have this humongous Randy Forbs sign that we're going to take with us. We're not going to give it back to your campaign. Take it with me.
We're going to miss you, John. We enjoyed having you down there, but we know you're doing great things, and can't keep a good man down. You're just doing too much stuff and moving quickly, and we're all proud of what you're accomplishing.
Well, thank you, sir, so much. And when you run for presidency, I can stick that sign back up, and I can just take out Congress and put president there, and we're good to go. That's why I'm taking it with me. I want to get a couple big issues coming up. Let's start yesterday. The House passed what I'm going to call the 20-week life bill. That's got probably no traction going into the Senate. But what was your thinking behind that?
John, at some point in time, you see just these horrendous things that are happening by some of these abortion doctors out there to these small unborn children. And we now know, with the scientific evidence that's been presented to our committee and statements that have been made, these babies at this age, we are told, can recognize their mother's voice, they can feel pain, and we just believe that it was a time that science had kind of caught up to where we were, and we may disagree on a lot of things about life, but one of the things that we ought to do is we ought to say at those particular moments when a child has reached that development level, we're not going to allow these kind of atrocities to take place to them, and that was the purpose of that bill.
I mean, it seems very sensible to anybody that understands the value of life. These are living, breathing children in many ways. As you say, they feel pain and things of that nature. And then you look at what happened in Philadelphia with this Dr. Gosnell, that horrific thing. I'm dumbfounded by the liberals' reaction to this. Try to help our audience understand what their thinking is.
It's all money. This is an enormous financial game. When you look at the amount of dollars that are poured into some of these procedures and some of the things that are happening, and they talk about wanting to have balance, they don't want to have any balance. And we try to have a rational discussion where you just sit down and say, how do we get the right balance here? Because, look, everybody wants to protect women. We want to protect their health, their safety. We want to protect their constitutional rights. But at the same time, there's a balance effort here. And when you look, like you just mentioned, at the atrocities that these doctors were doing to these small children, it ought to make anybody step back and say, at least rational people ought to agree with this and say enough is enough there.
So what happens now to the bill?
Well, as you said, it is very difficult to get anything through the Senate. And I am not overly optimistic that the Senate will take this up, but I think it's sometimes important to pass legislation that you think is the right legislation and move it on to the Senate and see what they do. And, of course, there's always another day in another Senate, and that's what you consistently hope that you'll do with good ideas and good pieces of legislation.
Well, you did the right thing. You've raised the level of debate now and the amount of awareness, and I think it's healthy, and I think you guys absolutely did the right thing, and I commend you all for that who were in favor of this, and we'll see how the dialogue goes and how it plays out. I want to change to another issue of life, in a way, which is the now deteriorating Syrian situation. We've got a number of Republicans calling for additional U.S. involvement in Syria. What are your thoughts?
Big picture, John, first of all, the United States has lost just enormous credibility around the world for us to be major players on the stage. We did it because the world sees us now with this administration using the IRS to intimidate its own people, using basically surveillance techniques on its own people. They see the president putting red lines out and then drawing them back. They see the president apologizing around the world. They see these huge cuts that we've made to national defense. And actions speak far louder than words. And so we haven't had the credibility we need to bring about kind of the international pressure on Syria. But I think that I am I'm certainly not in the same camp as some of these people that think we ought to take action in Syria. John, we're stretched too thin militarily right now. We don't know who the good guys and the bad guys are there. We put a lot of money there, but more importantly, lives and risk American lives in a situation like that. And at the end of the day, it may come out worse than it is right now. So I think the United States needs to be very, very careful at this late date about jumping in and doing any kind of military actions.
Congressman, do you feel that your position has the wherewithal in Congress to put enough pressure on those neocons now advocating further involvement or a new involvement in Syria to stop it? Or is it fait accompli?
No, I think, John, that certainly our position is, the chairman of the Sea Power and Projection Forces Subcommittee. I think we've forged a fairly strong position on national defense issues among kind of thinking people, in that whole industry and universe. And as I talk to many of them, John, they share the exact same thoughts that I have. So I don't think this is by far an issue that we're not going to be able to sway, and we're going to continue to voice those concerns. People need to realize Syria is not Iraq or Afghanistan, and it's a whole different world when you start going in there in terms of the cost, and I'm talking about cost in lives as well as resources.
No question. I want to switch, if I can, to the NSA surveillance, Edward Snowden. I know you've had meetings with people in the know in the Department of Defense and other areas. What exactly is going on with this surveillance system on the NSA, and what is your comfort level with it, Congressman?
Not comfortable at all. I think one of the things that we realize is that John, that one of the difficulties we have is that there are huge aspects of that program that I can't talk about, not even to you, certainly not on the program,
right,
because they're classified. But what I can tell you is this, that just like the administration has not followed the law with the Internal Revenue Service, just like they haven't followed the law in terms of immigration enforcement, just like they haven't followed the law with the Defense of Marriage Act, this administration has gone far, and I mean light years beyond what the Patriot Act gave them authority to do and what these FISA courts were set up to protect against. The entire focus of this effort was to say, if we have a foreign terrorist, we don't want to allow changes in technology to keep us from protecting and keeping the United States safe. But it was always designed, John, to laser in on a foreign terrorist. It was never designed to be this huge data mining kind of capability that we're hearing talked about. And one of the big problems we have is these FISA courts, I don't think, have really stepped up to the plate and done what they needed to do. And so we're going to have to go back and relook that legislation and I think put some teeth into it. We met even yesterday with the Judiciary Committee talking about some of those concepts, and I think we need to move forward with some of that.
Congressman Forbs, your colleague, Congressman Hurt, was on our show a week ago, and he said Congressman Griffith was on our show a week ago. I want to classify that. And he said that the real issue with this is it's simply not constitutional. Do you share that view?
Well, I think there are two aspects. I think one's what's constitutional, and I think reasonable people could differ over what aspects of it might be constitutional or not, but I don't think it complies with the law in any case, and since the administration has sworn a constitutional commitment to enforce and obey the laws, they're certainly breaking that aspect of it, in my opinion. And one of the difficulties we have, John, is that there's no real teeth mechanism, no accountability to an administration that does that when it comes to these kind of procedures. And we have simply got to install some of them to make sure we're doing checks and balances. One thing specifically, we believe the rules actually call for a member of the Judiciary Committee to be on the Intelligence Committee, and we've not been honoring that. And if we'd have had a Judiciary Committee member, somebody steeped in this law and looking in the Intelligence Committee, I don't think we'd have seen this stuff happening the way it's been happening. We're
with Congressman Randy Forbs, Republican of Virginia. This is the John Fredericks Show. Congressman, if the Patriot Act were to come up for reevaluation, would you be in favor of continuing it now, or do you think it should be perhaps tailed back?
I think the Patriot Act, as written, did not allow the kind of activity that we're concerned about, John, right now, and that you and I are worried about. I think if the Patriot Act came back up, and there are several sunset provisions in that statute, as you know, so I can say when it comes back up, I think certainly we are going to do some things to modify that and put additional teeth in it to make sure we comply with what the intent of that act was when it was actually passed.
Congressman, let's get to immigration reform. Yesterday, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid said, look, we've got to fast-track the debate. This is counter to what he said a couple weeks ago, which was that he would allow for extended amendments in debate. So now that's a switcheroo. Also, we've got the CBO now saying that, well, look, if we implement this thing, we're going to reduce the deficit by nearly $1 trillion. Do you think there's any truth to that?
Well, you know, obviously, John, a lot of this is in the details. I wish that they'd had the same sensitivity to the debt before they did these enormous stimulus bills that they're still funding, still paying for before they did Obamacare, which is what's really going to break the bank for the country. But the bottom line is the two differences between the House and the Senate on immigration is Harry Reid has the concept you put 8 people behind a room in some kind of secret deal, and you come out and you tell the whole country this is what it's going to be. The House is going to take a totally different tact, and what we're going to say is, no, we want transparency. We want the debate. We don't want to make a mistake on this. We want to get it right. And so we just sat, I was in hearings and markups all day yesterday from 10 until about 10 o'clock last night, because we want everybody to have their say. We want to make sure we get this right, and I think you're going to find the House doing it on a bill-specific basis as opposed to this monstrous comprehensive thing, because that's what got us in trouble with Obamacare, by trying to do too much and people didn't understand what was in there.
Congressman, on this immigration reform bill, there are some Republicans who obviously are enthusiasts behind it, and they see it as a political lifeline to survival. Lindsey Graham being the main proponent of that, obviously Senator Marco Rubio as well. Do you share that view?
No, I think we focus on doing the right things, and John, and if you do the right things, I think then you kind of let the politics fall where it may. I think one of the things we have to remember in this country that built this country is not people that went out and did political polls and focus groups and said this is what we're going to do, but it was the enforcement of the rule of law, and we've thrown that out the window in this country, and I think that needs to be an underlying principle in whatever we do in this immigration debate. And I think the second thing is we need to do what's right for the American people, and we shouldn't be just going in there and saying, okay, what do the focus groups tell us people want to hear? Short-term victories can be long-term defeats, John, and we want to be very, very careful we don't fall into those traps.
No question. Congressman, today in Berlin in front of the Brandenburg Gate, President Obama is going to make a speech. And one of the things that we understand he's going to be calling for is a unilateral treaty, a new reduction in nuclear armaments by about 1/3. Obviously, any type of a treaty has to pass Congress. Obviously, he would have to get the Russians to agree. This kind of came out of the blue. What do you make of it?
Well, every time the president, he seems committed and his party seems committed, we have to fight in every defense authorization bill because they want to reduce our nuclear arsenal. And when you look at the experts who are talking about that, most of these treaties do not involve, for example, the Chinese or some of these other countries. And, you know, we use our nuclear weapons, John, not because we ever want to have to launch them, but because by having them, we deter a lot of bad actors around the world. And I am very, very concerned about this constant reduction that the president's had in our nuclear capability, and so are a lot of military experts.
Does this proposed treaty have any legs?
Well, the concern you have is that the House doesn't have to deal with the treaties. It's only the Senate. And you and I both know that some of the things that they do and the actions they take over there, you just kind of scratch your head when it comes to national security and national defense. So it always concerns me whenever you've got something that can pertain to our national defense when all you have is the administration and the Senate that have to okay it.
No question. Congressman, we've got 1 minute. I want you to comment, get your thoughts on the proposed sale of Smithfield Foods to the Chi-Coms. Anything about that you find troubling?
I find the whole deal troubling. I think one of the things that we look at, John, host of issues on there. For example, we've got a major source of food supply that we're getting ready to have the Chinese just basically walk in and purchase. I think we have never had anyone in the United States really start raising the question, is our food supply part of our national security issues that we should look at? We think we should do that. We think the Agriculture Secretary should be somebody involved in this, and we're writing a letter to the President asking him to do that. We think it's very concerning for the stockholders to sell this out. You know, we lost the space program. We walked away from that. We lost manufacturing to the Chinese. Now we're giving them one of the largest food supply entities in the world. And I think it's something we need to be very concerned about. So we're going to be asking an awful lot of questions about it in the coming weeks.
Good. I think this thing with Smithfield Foods make no sense. I'm glad you're on the engine of it. Congressman Randy Forbs, we thank you for joining us today. This is the John Fredericks Show. We'll be right back.